There are some moments in life that are so ridiculous your brain refuses to process them at first. You stare at what's happening, waiting for someone to yell "gotcha," waiting for a hidden camera crew to step out from behind a bush, waiting for reality to correct itself. For me, that moment happened on a humid Thursday evening when I came home from work, hit the garage door opener, and watched a stranger's truck sitting inside my garage like it had been there for years. Not in my driveway. Not parked halfway across the entrance. Inside, right in the middle of my garage, and behind the steering wheel, fast asleep with the engine running, was the last person on earth who should have been there. A man named Grant Mercer, the president of our HOA. Before I tell you how he ended up trapped in that garage staring into the eyes of two very large Rottweilers, let me take you back a little, because this story didn't start with a truck. It started with power. And unfortunately, some people don't know what to do when they get a little bit of it. My name is Cole Bennett. I'm 53 years old, divorced, semi-retired, and for the most part, I like living a quiet life. Give me a workshop, a cup of coffee, an old country station playing through a dusty radio, and a project that keeps my hands busy, and I'm perfectly content. My garage wasn't just a garage. It was my sanctuary. Every tool had its place. Every shelf had a purpose. I spent years turning that space into something that felt entirely mine. Out there, nobody told me what to do. Nobody argued politics. Nobody complained about grass height or fence colors. It was peaceful. At least it used to be. Everything changed when Grant Mercer became president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. Now, if you've ever lived in an HOA neighborhood, you know there are usually two kinds of board members. The first group wants to maintain property values and keep things running smoothly. The second group treats the HOA like they're running a small dictatorship. Grant belonged firmly in the second category. The man loved authority the way some people love barbecue. He couldn't get enough of it. Before becoming HOA president, Grant sold insurance. Nice enough guy back then. Friendly smile, firm handshake, always waving at neighbors. But something happened after he got elected. It was like somebody handed him a badge, and suddenly he thought he worked for the federal government. Within weeks, violation notices started appearing everywhere. The Henderson family got fined because their basketball hoop stayed in the driveway overnight. Mrs. Delgado received a warning because her flower pots weren't considered community appropriate. A retired Marine down the street got cited because his American flag pole exceeded some obscure measurement requirement nobody had ever heard of before. Every day seemed to bring a new rule. Every week brought another complaint. The neighborhood slowly transformed from a community into Grant's personal kingdom. At first, I stayed out of it. I always stay out of drama if I can help it. That's one of the advantages of getting older. You learn that most battles aren't worth fighting. But eventually Grant found his way into my orbit. The first incident happened on a Saturday afternoon. I was rebuilding an old workbench inside my garage. Door open, tools everywhere, sawdust covering half the floor. The kind of afternoon I genuinely enjoy. Then I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned around and there stood Grant, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on. Looking entirely too pleased with himself. "Afternoon, Cole," he said. "Need something?" I asked. He smiled. "Just doing routine inspections." I glanced around. "Of my garage, of the neighborhood. You're standing inside my garage." He ignored that part. Instead, he looked at his clipboard and said, "Garage door has been open for approximately 47 minutes. I laughed because I honestly thought he was joking. He wasn't. And I asked, "Extended garage exposure can negatively impact neighborhood aesthetics." I stared at him for several seconds. "Grant, I'm building a workbench. The rule states garage doors should remain closed whenever possible. I'm literally using the garage. Just wanted to make you aware." Then he scribbled something onto his clipboard and walked away. I remember standing there covered in sawdust, wondering if I had just experienced a conversation or a minor stroke. Unfortunately, things only got worse from there. Over the following months, Grant developed a strange obsession with my property. One week he complained about my trash cans. Another week he complained about a work light visible through my garage window. Then there was the infamous driveway incident. I came home from grocery shopping and found Grant's truck parked halfway across my driveway, not completely blocking it, just enough to make getting in nearly impossible. I walked over and knocked on his door. He answered holding a tablet. "You're blocking my driveway," I said, "only temporarily." "Move it," he sighed dramatically. "We're all neighbors, Cole." "Exactly, so stop parking in my driveway." The smile disappeared. For a brief second I saw something underneath that polished HOA president personality. Arrogance, entitlement, the belief that rules applied differently to him than everyone else. He finally moved the truck, but after that things became personal. Violation notices appeared more frequently. Inspection visits increased. Every interaction carried this weird undertone of hostility neither of us openly acknowledged. Looking back now, I think Grant hated the fact that I never treated him like an authority figure. Everyone else argued with him or feared him. I mostly rolled my eyes and went back to whatever I was doing. Maybe that bothered him more than outright resistance. Then came the day everything changed. It had been a brutal shift. One of those days where every hour feels twice as long as it should. I spent most of it looking forward to one thing: going home, sitting in my garage, working on an old cedar cabinet I'd been restoring. Nothing complicated, just peace and quiet. As I turned onto my street, I clicked the garage remote. The door began rising, and then I hit the brakes so hard my coffee flew into the passenger seat. There was a truck in my garage. Grant's truck, parked perfectly in the center of my workshop like he owned the place. For a moment I honestly wondered if I had somehow pulled into the wrong house. But there was my mailbox, my driveway, my front porch, my garage, and inside it sat the HOA president, sleeping. My pulse immediately spiked. I got out of the truck and walked toward the garage, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The engine of his truck was still running, air conditioning humming softly. Grant reclined in the driver's seat with his mouth slightly open, completely unconscious to the world. I knocked on the window. Nothing. I knocked harder, still nothing. The man slept like he had rented the place. That's when anger gave way to something else. Not rage, not frustration. Clarity. Because this wasn't an accident. You don't accidentally drive into another man's garage, position your truck perfectly between his tool chest and workbench, then settle in for a nap. This was entitlement taken to its final form, and standing there staring at him, I realized something. Grant had spent 2 years teaching everyone else about consequences. Maybe it was finally time for him to experience a few of his own. The funny thing about patience is that people mistake it for weakness. Grant certainly did. For nearly 2 years, he had pushed boundaries with everyone around him and somehow convinced himself there would never be consequences. Standing there in my garage, staring at him asleep behind the wheel of his truck, I realized this wasn't really about a parking spot anymore. It wasn't about violation notices. It wasn't about driveways or trash cans or garage doors. It was about a man who genuinely believed other people's property belonged to him whenever it was convenient. And right then, looking at his truck sitting in the middle of my workshop, I decided I was done explaining boundaries. It was time for him to experience one. I quietly pressed the garage door button. The door rolled downward with its familiar mechanical rumble. Grant never moved, didn't twitch, didn't stir, nothing. The outside world disappeared one panel at a time until the garage sealed shut with a soft thud. Now it was just me, Grant, and approximately 900 square feet of consequences. I stood there for another moment, arms crossed, studying him. Then an idea came to me so naturally, I almost laughed. I walked through the interior door into my house and whistled once. Heavy footsteps immediately echoed across the hardwood floor. Then another set. A few seconds later, Tank appeared around the corner first. Tank was my older Rottweiler. 120 pounds of muscle, discipline, and protective instincts. Behind him came Moose, younger, bigger, and somehow even friendlier. Moose believed every human being on Earth existed specifically to pet him. Together they looked less like household pets and more like private security contractors. "Come on, boys," I said. Their ears perked up immediately. "We've got company." The moment I opened the garage door leading from the house, both dogs stopped. Their noses lifted. They smelled a stranger instantly. Tank moved first, slow, controlled, alert. Moose followed beside him, tail swaying slightly. The two of them walked directly toward Grant's truck and sat down in front of the driver's side window. Then they waited. I leaned against my workbench and folded my arms. This ought to be interesting. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Finally, Grant started moving. At first it was subtle, a shift in his shoulders, a small movement of his head. Then his eyes slowly opened. I'll never forget the expression on his face. 1 second he was waking up from a comfortable nap. The next second he found himself staring directly into the face of a Rottweiler roughly the size of a small bear. Tank didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't move. He simply stared. Grant froze. Complete silence filled the garage. Then came the scream, not a yell, not a shout. A full-body panic scream that sounded like a grown man discovering a ghost sitting in his lap. Tank blinked. Moose looked confused. I nearly bit through the inside of my cheek trying not to laugh. Grant scrambled backwards so violently he slammed his shoulder against the door. His sunglasses flew off. His coffee cup tipped over. Somehow he managed to get tangled in his own seatbelt despite not even wearing it. For several glorious seconds he looked like a man fighting invisible octopuses. Then he finally noticed me standing near the workbench. "Cole," he shouted. "What the hell is this?" "Good afternoon, Grant." "Open the garage." "Why?" His eyes widened. "Why?" He pointed at Tank. "Because of that." Tank tilted his head slightly. The movement somehow made Grant even more nervous. "You mean my dog? That thing is enormous. His name's Tank. I don't care if his name is Abraham Lincoln. Get him away from me." Moose chose that exact moment to stand up and place both paws gently against the truck door so he could get a better look inside. Grant made a sound I have never heard another human being make before or since. It started as a scream and somehow transformed into a squeak halfway through. "Oh my God." Moose immediately backed away, startled by the reaction. "He's friendly," I said. "Friendly?" Grant shouted. "That animal weighs more than some NFL linebackers. That's actually Moose. There are 2 of them." At that point I finally lost the battle and started laughing. Not because I wanted to humiliate him, not because I hated him, but because the entire situation was absurd. This was the same man who spent years intimidating retirees over mailbox decorations. The same man who threatened legal action over lawn ornaments. The same man who lectured everyone about rules and property rights. And now he was trapped inside a truck begging for mercy from 2 dogs who were mostly interested in figuring out whether he had snacks. Then something unexpected happened. Grant sneezed, once, then again, then 3 more times in rapid succession. His face turned red, his eyes watered, he rubbed his nose aggressively. "Oh no," I muttered. Another sneeze exploded out of him, followed by another, then another. Suddenly everything made sense. "You're allergic?" I asked. "Very," he shouted before sneezing again. Moose looked genuinely concerned. Tank remained completely unimpressed. For a moment I considered ending the lesson right there. Allergies aren't something to mess around with, but then Grant pointed at me through the windshield. "This is illegal," he shouted. "You can't do this." I raised an eyebrow. "Grant, you're literally sitting inside my garage." He opened his mouth, closed it. Opened it again. Nothing came out. Another sneeze interrupted whatever defense he had prepared. "How did you even get in here?" I asked. He avoided eye contact. "I was tired." "That's your explanation. I just needed a place to rest for a few minutes." "So naturally you chose someone else's garage." More silence, more sneezing. Finally he muttered something I never thought I'd hear. "I wasn't thinking." There it was, the truth, simple, honest, human. For the first time since becoming HOA president, Grant didn't sound like an authority figure. He sounded like a guy who had made an incredibly stupid decision and suddenly realized how ridiculous it looked from the outside. The garage fell quiet. Tank sat down. Moose lay on the floor. Grant rubbed his eyes and looked exhausted, older somehow, smaller, less intimidating. "Do you know why everyone is frustrated with you?" I asked. He didn't answer. "Because you treat every interaction like a power struggle. Every conversation becomes a rule. Every disagreement becomes a violation. You stopped seeing neighbors as people." Grant stared through the windshield. I could tell the words landed because for once he wasn't arguing. He wasn't defending himself. He wasn't quoting bylaws. He was listening. Another sneeze escaped before he finally sighed. "Maybe," he said quietly. "Maybe I got carried away." That admission surprised me more than finding his truck in my garage. Grant Mercer admitting fault felt like spotting a unicorn riding a motorcycle. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then he looked down at the steering wheel. "You know what the worst part is?" he asked. "What?" "You're probably right." The anger I'd been carrying around for months started fading a little, not disappearing completely, but softening. Because underneath all the arrogance and authority and HOA nonsense was just another flawed guy who had let a little power go to his head. It didn't excuse what he'd done, but it explained it. Finally, I walked over to the garage opener. Grant tracked every movement like a hostage watching someone reach for a key. "You done parking in my garage?" I asked. "Forever." "You done parking in my driveway?" "Forever." "You done treating the neighborhood like your personal kingdom?" He hesitated. Then nodded. "I'm working on it." I pressed the button. The garage door slowly began rising. Fresh air flooded inside. Sunlight spilled across the floor. Grant practically lunged for the gear shift. The truck jerked backward, stalled, then lurched again before finally rolling toward freedom. Halfway down the driveway, he stopped and rolled down the window. His eyes were still red from allergies. His hair looked terrible. His pride looked even worse. "Cole." "Yeah." He paused. Then said something I never expected to hear. "I'm sorry." Before I could answer, another sneeze hit him so hard he nearly disappeared behind the steering wheel. Then he drove away. I stood there watching his truck disappear around the corner. Tank sat beside me. Moose leaned against my leg. And for the first time in a very long while, my garage felt peaceful again. I thought the story was over. I honestly did. I figured Grant had learned his lesson, swallowed his pride, and moved on. What I didn't know was that someone else in the neighborhood had been watching everything unfold, and they had plans that would make Grant's HOA power trips look harmless by comparison. For about 3 weeks, things were quiet. Not perfectly quiet, but close enough that people started noticing. The violation letters stopped. The random inspections stopped. The endless HOA emails about lawn edging, mailbox paint colors, and trash can positioning disappeared. Neighbors began acting like normal human beings again. Kids left bicycles in driveways without triggering a constitutional crisis. People actually stood outside and talked to each other. It was strange how much lighter the neighborhood felt when nobody was constantly looking for reasons to punish everyone else. And to his credit, Grant seemed different. Not completely different, but enough. He wasn't marching around with a clipboard anymore. He wasn't knocking on doors. Every now and then I'd see him walking his property, looking almost uncomfortable whenever people waved at him. Like he wasn't sure how to be a neighbor after spending 2 years acting like an enforcer. I figured maybe the garage incident had humbled him. Maybe waking up trapped in a garage with 2 giant Rottweilers and a severe allergy had done what months of arguments couldn't. Then one evening, everything changed again. I was sitting in my driveway with Tank and Moose stretched out beside me. The sun was dropping behind the houses. One of those peaceful summer evenings where the entire neighborhood glows orange for a few minutes before dark. That's when I noticed Grant walking toward my house. He looked nervous. Not embarrassed, nervous, big difference. "Got a minute?" he asked. I immediately knew something was wrong. Grant wasn't the type to ask for help. Sure. He glanced around before lowering his voice. Something weird is happening, I laughed. Grant, that's not exactly specific. No, seriously, he rubbed the back of his neck. People have been reporting someone walking around the neighborhood at night. Walking, with a flashlight and a clipboard. That got my attention. Another HOA volunteer, he shook his head. That's the thing, it's not one of ours. Over the next few minutes he explained what several residents had reported. A man walking through the neighborhood after midnight. Taking notes, looking at houses, photographing vehicles, sometimes standing outside properties for several minutes at a time. Nobody knew who he was, nobody knew why he was there. At first people assumed Grant had hired someone. Considering his reputation, that wasn't exactly a crazy assumption, but according to him, he had nothing to do with it. And you believe that? I asked. For the first time in a long while, he looked genuinely hurt. Yeah, he said quietly. I do. That answer stuck with me, maybe because it sounded honest. Maybe because after everything that happened, I wanted to believe people could change. Either way, I agreed to keep an eye out. 4 nights later, Tank noticed something before I did. It was nearly midnight. I just let the dogs into the backyard when Tank froze, ears up, body stiff. Moose immediately stopped playing and focused in the same direction. That's never a good sign. Dogs know things long before people do. I followed their gaze toward the end of the street. A figure moved beneath a street lamp. Tall, male, carrying something in one hand, a flashlight, and tucked beneath his arm, a clipboard. Well, I'll be damned. I grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the sidewalk. Tank and Moose stayed close beside me. The figure noticed us almost immediately. He hesitated, then started walking faster. Hey, I called. No response. He walked faster, then faster. Suddenly, he wasn't walking anymore. He was leaving fast. That's interesting, I muttered. The dog sensed it too, something wasn't right. The next morning I told Grant what happened. His reaction surprised me. He looked scared, not annoyed, not angry, scared. That's when he showed me something, an email, anonymous. No sender, no signature, just a message. We know what happened in the garage. We know what you're hiding. More instructions will follow. My stomach tightened. You're kidding. He shook his head. I've gotten 3 of them. Then he handed me another printout. Same style, different message. We are documenting violations ignored by current leadership. New management is coming. What the hell does that even mean? I asked. I don't know. Over the next week things escalated. More anonymous emails, more sightings of the mysterious inspector, rumors spreading through the neighborhood, people whispering about corruption, missing HOA funds, secret violations, hidden investigations. None of it made sense. And then one afternoon, everything clicked into place. It happened when a former resident named Russell Hayes contacted me. Russell had been HOA president years before Grant. Most people barely remembered him. He moved away after abruptly resigning. According to neighborhood gossip, he'd left because the stress became too much. But when I met him for coffee at a diner outside town, he told me the truth. I didn't quit because of stress, he said. I quit because someone tried to destroy me. That got my attention. He explained how strange accusations had appeared near the end of his presidency. Anonymous complaints, fake reports, rumors designed to divide neighbors. Eventually, everything became so toxic he walked away. And now it's happening again, he said, exactly the same way. Who? I asked. He looked around before lowering his voice. I never figured that part out. The drive home felt longer than usual. Because for the first time, this wasn't about Grant anymore. It wasn't about an HOA president abusing power. Somebody was actively manipulating the neighborhood. Somebody wanted chaos. Somebody wanted everyone fighting each other. That night I called Grant. For the first time ever, we worked together instead of against each other. We compared emails, compared reports, compared timelines, and eventually a pattern emerged. Every rumor, every anonymous message, every incident. They all benefited one person, a local property developer named Victor Hale. Victor owned land near our community. For years, he tried convincing residents to support a redevelopment proposal that would dramatically increase HOA fees while giving his company lucrative contracts. The board repeatedly rejected it, including Grant, including Russell before him. Suddenly, the pieces started fitting together. Victor couldn't control the HOA through elections. Maybe he'd create enough chaos that people would beg for new leadership. Maybe he'd install people loyal to him. Maybe he'd profit from the confusion. We didn't have proof. Not yet, but we had enough to keep digging. 3 nights later, we got it. A resident security camera captured the mysterious clipboard inspector meeting with one of Victor's project managers behind a shopping center. Money changed hands. Documents changed hands. The footage was clear, crystal clear. When we brought the evidence to the board, everything unraveled fast. Lawyers got involved. Investigations started. Several contracts were frozen. Victor publicly denied everything, of course. People like him always do. But the damage was done. The story spread through the community faster than wildfire. Within days, neighbors finally understood what had been happening. We hadn't been fighting each other. We'd been manipulated into fighting each other. Looking back, that's probably the strangest part of this entire story. I spent 2 years thinking Grant was the biggest problem in the neighborhood. Sometimes he was. Sometimes he absolutely deserved the frustration people felt toward him. But in the end, the person I expected to fight became the person standing beside me when things actually mattered. The final HOA meeting of the year was packed. Every chair filled. Every wall lined with residents. People wanted answers. They wanted accountability. They wanted closure. Grant stood at the front of the room and did something nobody expected. He apologized. Not a politician's apology. Not a carefully crafted statement. A real one. He admitted mistakes. Admitted arrogance. Admitted he had lost sight of why communities exist in the first place. Then he announced he wouldn't seek another term as president. The room fell silent. For a moment, nobody knew how to react. Then something unexpected happened. People applauded, not because they hated him, not because they wanted him gone, because for the first time he sounded honest. After the meeting ended, he walked over to me in the parking lot. "You know," he said, "if you told me a year ago we'd end up working together, I would have laughed in your face." "Same here," he smiled. "Still think about that garage sometimes." I laughed. "Trust me, so do the dogs." We stood there for a moment looking out across the neighborhood. Kids riding bikes. Porch lights glowing. Neighbors talking. Normal life. The kind of life communities are supposed to have. Then Grant shook my hand and headed toward his truck, this time parked exactly where it belonged. And honestly, that's where I thought the story ended. But here's the question I've never fully answered. If Victor was really behind everything, why were the anonymous emails still arriving weeks after he was exposed? Why did residents continue reporting strange vehicles late at night? And who was the person standing across the street from my house 2 months later, watching my garage? Before disappearing the moment Tank started barking, maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was coincidence. Or maybe somebody else had been pulling strings the entire time. I'll let you decide. And now I want to hear from you. Was Grant a victim, a villain, or both? Did he deserve what happened in my garage, or did I go too far? And if you discovered someone was manipulating your entire neighborhood from behind the scenes, what would you have done differently? Let me know down in the comments, because after everything that happened, I'm still not sure where justice ends and revenge begins.